first theme is the reasons of the conquest from the Ottoman Empire's perspective. Most importantly, capturing Constantinople is the main objective due to its importance on making the Ottomans superior comparing to other Christian nations, because it was obvious that the meaning of a possible Ottoman victory was the fall of the Byzantine Empire, which was the longest lasting medieval power. This quotation shows how the world of Islam willing to take the Constantinople into its territory, and this clarifies why the Sultan Mehmed II is so enthusiastic about the conquest. Therefore, Ottoman Empire could gain an advantage over other Christian nations by conquering the city. There is also another reason including religious point of view. The Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, quoted, "Constantinople will be conquered one day. What an amazing conqueror that who will conquer it, and what an amazing soldier that obeys this conqueror." In addition, Constantinople, at the very strategic point between the Europe and Asia continents, and it divides the Ottoman landscape and destroys the territorial integrity of the Ottoman Empire. Moreover, the Byzantine Empire provoked the Anatolian Seigneury and supported the rebellions that revolt against the Ottoman rule. And these provocations gave another reason to Sultan Mehmed II for the conquest. Before Sultan Mehmed II, there were other sultans that tried to achieve that goal, but they have failed for some reasons. These reasons make the conqueror necessity for the Ottomans. Also, Constantinople is in an important position in terms of land and sea trade, because this city was one of the largest trading centers in the world, where shoppers could stroll down covered streets and pick up anything from Bulgarian linen to Arabian perfumes.
The Ottomans had a much larger force. Recent studies and Ottoman archival data state that there were about 50,000 to 80,000 Ottoman soldiers, including between 5,000 and 10,000 Janissaries, 70 cannons, an elite infantry corps, and thousands of Christian troops, notably 1,500 Serbian cavalry that the Serbian Lord Drag Brankovic was forced to supply as part of his obligation to the Ottoman Sultan. Just a few months before, he had supplied the money for the reconstruction of the walls of Constantinople. The army defending Constantinople was relatively small, totaling about 7,000 men, 2,000 of whom were foreigners. At the onset of the siege, probably fewer than 50,000 people were living within the walls, including the refugees from the surrounding area. Turkish commander Dorgano, who was in Constantinople in the pay of the emperor, was also guarding one of the quarters of the city on the seaward side with the Turks in his pay. These Turks kept loyal to the emperor and perished in the ensuing battle. The defending army's Genoese corps were well trained and equipped, while the rest of the army consisted of small numbers of well-trained soldiers, armed civilians, sailors, and volunteer forces from foreign communities, and finally monks. Orban, a Hungarian, made a cannon that was named Basilica and was 27 feet long and able to hurl a 600-pound stone ball over a mile. In preparation for the final assault, Mehmet had an artillery train of 70 large pieces dragged from his headquarters at Edirne, in addition to the bombers cast on the spot. Mehmet planned to attack the Theodosian walls, the intricate series of walls and ditches protecting Constantinople from an attack from the west, the only part of the city not surrounded by water. His army encamped outside the city on the Monday after Easter, 2 April 1453. The bulk of the Ottoman army were encamped south of the Golden Horn. The regular European troops, stretched out along the entire length of the walls, were commanded by Karaca Pasha. The regular troops from Anatolia under Ishak Pasha were stationed south of the Lycis down to the Sea of Marmara. Mehmet himself erected his red and gold tent near the Mesotestion, where the guns and the elite regiments, the Janissaries, were positioned. The Bashabazuks were spread out behind the front lines. Other troops under Zahan Pasha were employed north of the Golden Horn. Communication was maintained by a road that had been constructed over the marshy head of the Horn. Mehmed built a fleet to besiege the city from the sea, and before the siege of Constantinople, it was known that the Ottomans had the ability to cast medium-sized cannons, but the range of some pieces they were able to field far surpassed the defenders' expectations. The Ottomans deployed a number of cannons, anywhere from 12 cannons to 62 cannons. They were built at foundries that employed Turkish cannon founders and technicians, most notably Saruja, in addition to at least one foreign cannon founder, Urban. Most of the cannons at siege were built by Turkish engineers, including a large bombard by Saruja, while one cannon was built by Urban, who contributed a large bombard. On 5 April, the Sultan himself arrived with his last troops, and the defenders took up their positions. As their numbers were insufficient to occupy the walls in their entirety, it had been decided that only the outer walls would be manned. Constantine and his Greek troops guarded the Mesotician, the middle section of the land walls, where they were crossed by the river Lycius. This section was considered the weakest spot in the walls and attack was feared here most. Justiniani was stationed to the north of the emperor, at the Caroesian Gate, Mirandrian. Later during the siege, he was shifted to the Mesotician to join Constantine, leaving the Mirandrian to the charge of the Bocchiadis brothers. Minato and his Venetians were stationed in the Lacane palace, together with Teodoro Caristo, the Langasco brothers, and Archbishop Leonardo of Chios. To the left of the emperor, further south, were the commanders Cataneo with Genoese troops and Theophilus Palaiologos, who guarded the Pagae Gate with Greek soldiers. The section of the land walls from the Pagae Gate to the Golden Gate was defended by the Venetian Filippo Contarini, while Demetrius Cantacuzenius had taken position on the southernmost part of the Theodosian wall. The sea walls were manned more sparsely, with Jacopo Contarini at Studian, a makeshift defense force of Greek monks to his left hand, and Prince Orhan at the harbor of Eleutherius. Perejuela was stationed at the Great Palace with Genoese and Catalan troops. Cardinal Isidore of Kiev guarded the tip of the peninsula near the boom. The sea walls at the southern shore of the Golden Horn were by Venetian and Genoese sailors under Gabriele Trevisano. It has been claimed that Constantinople was the best defended city in Europe at that time. The strategies of the Byzantine army. The city had about 20 kilometers of walls, one of the strongest sets of fortified walls in existence. The walls had certainly been repaired and were in fairly good shape, giving the defenders sufficient reason to believe that they could hold out until the help from the west arrived. In addition, the defenders were relatively well equipped with a fleet of 26 ships, 5 from Genoa, 5 from Venice, 3 from Venetians, 1 from Ancona, 1 from Aragon, 1 from France, and about 10 Byzantine. Meanwhile, despite some probing attacks, the Ottoman fleet under Süleyman Baltaoğlu couldn't enter the Golden Horn due to the chain the Byzantines had previously stretched across the entrance. So, Mehmed ordered the construction of a road, greased logs, across Galata on the north side of the Golden Horn, and dragged his ships over the hill, directly into the Golden Horn on 22 April, by passing the chain barrier. The seriously threatened the flow of supplies from Genoese ships from the colony of Pera, and demoralized the Byzantine defenders. On the night of 28 April, an attempt was made to destroy the Ottoman ships already in the Golden Horn using fire ships, but the Ottomans had been warned in advance and forced the Christians to retreat with heavy losses. With the failure of their attack on the Ottoman vessels, the defenders were forced to disperse part of their forces to defend the sea walls along the Golden Horn. The Ottomans sought to break through the walls by constructing tunnels in an effort to mine them from mid-May to 25 May. Many of the sappers were miners of Serbian origin sent from Novo by the Serbian despot. They were placed under the command of Zahan Pasha. However, an engineer named Johann Grund, a German, who came together with the Genoese contingent, had counter-mines dug, allowing Byzantine troops to enter the mines and kill the workers. On 21 May, Mehmed sent an ambassador to Constantinople and offered to lift the siege if they give him the city. He promised he would allow the emperor and any other inhabitants to leave with their possessions. Moreover, he would recognize the emperor as governor of the Peloponnese. Lastly, he guaranteed the safety of the population that might choose to remain in the city. Constantine XI only agreed to pay higher tributes to the Sultan and recognize the status of all the conquered castles and lands in the hands of the Turks as Ottoman possession. At the beginning of the siege, Mehmed sent out some of his best troops to reduce the remaining Byzantine strongholds outside the city of Constantinople. The fortress of Therapia on the Bosphorus and a small castle at the village of Studies near the Sea of Marmara were taken within a few days. The Princess Islands in the Sea of Marmara were taken by Admiral Bartoldo's fleet. Mehmed's massive cannon fired on the walls for weeks, but due to its imprecision and extremely slow rate of reloading, the Byzantines were able to repair most of the damage after each shot, limiting the cannon's effect. And the final assault. Preparations for the final assault were started in the evening of 26 May and continued to the next day. The Ottomans extensively mobilized their manpower in order to prepare for the general offensive. On May 28th, as the Ottoman army prepared for the final assault, large-scale religious processions were held in the city. In the evening, a last solemn ceremony was held in the Hagia Sophia, in which the emperor and representatives of both the Latin and Greek church partook, together with nobility from both sides. Shortly after midnight on May 29, the all-out offensive began. The Christian troops of the Ottoman Empire attacked first, followed by the successive waves of the irregular Azabs, who were poorly trained and equipped, and Anatolians who focused on a section of the Blasharni walls in the northwest part of the city, which had been damaged by the cannon. Finally, as the battle was continuing, the last wave, consisting of elite Janissaries, attacked the city walls. The Genoese general in charge of the land troops, Giovanni Giustiniani, was grievously wounded during the attack, and his evacuation from the ramparts caused a panic in the ranks of the defenders. When Turkish flags were seen flying above a small postern gate, the Kerkoporta, which was left open, panic ensued, and the defense collapsed as Janissary soldiers, led by Ulubatlı Hasan, pressed forward. Many Greek soldiers ran back home to protect their families. The Venetians ran over to their ships, and a few of the Genoese got over to Galata. The rest committed suicide by jumping off the city walls or surrendered. On the other hand, Niccolò Barbaro, a Venetian eyewitness to the siege, wrote in his diary that it was said that Constantine hanged himself at the moment when the Turks broke in the San Romano gate, although his ultimate fate remains unknown. After the initial assault, the Ottoman army fanned out along the main thoroughfare of the city, the Mese, past the great forums, and past the Church of the Holy Apostles, which Mehmed II wanted to provide a seat for his newly appointed patriarch, which would help him better control his Christian subjects. Mehmed II had sent an advance guard to protect key buildings such as the Church of the Holy Apostles. Ottoman casualties are unknown, but they are believed by most historians to be very heavy due to several unsuccessful Ottoman attacks made during the siege and final assault. Barbaro described blood flowing in the city, like rainwater in the gutters after a sudden storm, and bodies of Turks and Christians floating in the sea, like melons along a canal. Around this time, Mehmed had a final council with his senior officers. Here he encountered some resistance. One of his viziers, the veteran Halil Pasha, who had always disapproved of Mehmed's plans to conquer the city, now admonished him to abandon the siege in the face of recent adversity. Sagan Pasha argued against Halil Pasha and insisted on an immediate attack. Mehmed planned to overpower the walls by sheer force, expecting that the weakened Byzantine defense by the prolonged siege would now be worn out before he ran out of troops and started preparations for a final all-out offensive.
With the conquest, most of Eastern Orthodoxy started to be ruled by Ottomans, who are Muslims. The third theme is the social and political effects of the conquest. Fall of Constantinople was the end of Eastern Roman Empire, which is the last standing part of Roman Empire, and 1500 years of Roman glory has ended. After the invasion, Ottoman Empire ensured their civil integrity and took control of Bosphorus and Silk Road. Furthermore, the Ottomans provided territorial integrity between Anatolia and Rumelia. After this domination in crucial trade routes, Ottoman Empire became the biggest threat for the Western Christian European powers. This rising power on the east forced Europeans to seek for new alternatives for their well-being and their economy. This situation was one of the most important reasons of the discovery of the Americas, and possibly, in the long term, it was the most significant political and historical impact of the conquest. Also, Mehmed II, who was the head commander of invasion, has assumed the title of Fatih, which means conqueror in Turkish. Many Byzantines immigrated to the west, largely to city of Rome, and this case was one of the precursor reasons of Renaissance. For many historians, it was the end of the Middle Age and it was the beginning of the New Age. But this argument is still a bit controversial. As a result of all these marvelous events, Constantinople, or as its new name Istanbul, became a magnificent mixture of different cultures, and today Istanbul is still a colorful land with great cultural variety. On the other hand, Ottoman Empire has changed many things in Constantinople. City naturally redesigned in hundreds of years with Ottoman culture and Islamic figures. As a most known example, Hagia Sophia has turned into a mosque, and even today it's still an important figure for Turkish